Welcome everyone, Christine here with an Air Supremacy deck for Broken Arrow as the United States. Now, generally speaking, when it comes to air power, specifically when it comes to jet fighters, I would recommend having team coordination in an ideal universe and having people working together. So some people would focus on jet fighters for air-to-air combat, some people would focus on air-to-ground attack, but this deck is going to give you those kind of capabilities just for yourself. Though there are, of course, going to be trade-offs, specifically when it comes to support. So, in terms of the army builder, we create a new battle group, and what you want to go for is Special Operation Forces. The reason you want to go for Special Forces is because Special Forces have some of the best planes in the game. Though, of course, they don't have enough points in aircraft to be able to get all of them. So you want to go with something to complement that, or at the very least give you more points. So you have a choice, several choices. You can go for airborne, you can go for strikers, or you can go for the Marines. Personally, I would prefer going for the Marines. The reason is that the Marines do have tanks. They're not going to be as good as the Armor Brigade, but they can still get active protection tanks, so you can put Tusk armor, put trophies on these M1, A1 FAPs, so two of them would have active protection, and you still have like jammers on the HCs right here. But again, your tanks are not necessarily going to be the best in a lot of ways, but you can get LAVs with anti-tank missiles if you want to, or go for M60s if you want to. Though if you just want a bunch of vehicles to be able to stop enemy charges, yeah, LAVs with ATMs would be pretty solid at getting the job done. Just a couple of M1, A1 FEPs when you really do want tanks. Now, the heart of air supremacy is not really the jets necessarily, it's actually helicopters. The choices you make with helicopters. From my point of view, with helicopters, what you want to focus on is cargo capacity, so moving capacity. You want to be able to move things across the map quickly, efficiently, and stealthily. This is why Special Forces do win out compared to basically everyone else. But then you also want scouting helicopters or attack helicopters of some kind of description, though I would say the attack helicopter role is not as important as just being able to move a lot of freaking things around. So, for instance, the King Stallion, as an example. Don't worry too much about weapons. Just get a couple of these things. They do have an enormous level of movement capacity on them, cargo capacity on them, so don't underestimate that kind of capability. You can use Ospreys. I would probably put a minigun just for some attack capability on them. Like King Stallions, yeah, you don't want to send them to attack anything. You want them to move large amounts of people. But Ospreys don't have that kind of capability. However, one of the important differences is they're much faster. So having that kind of speed capability can really help you out in the battlefield. For an attack helicopter, I would go with the Comanche, and I would just put a bunch of AT Hellfire missiles. The reason I would put them on these, they can have good sensors, they have that stealth capability, and with attack helicopters, they're kind of like firefighters. So basically, if an opponent has a breakthrough with armored forces, you want to use your attack helicopters to stop them dead in their tracks. And this is where little birds can also help a bit, because they're pretty cheap, but they still carry a good amount of missiles and 4 missiles on them. And then yeah, you get things like Chinooks, you get different kind of options, so Vipers, Vipers or Super Cobras. So you can get a good amount of Hellfire missiles on these things, and even Sidewinders on these things. If you or sidearms, so anti-radiation missiles or anti-air missiles. I'm not sure a helicopter with an anti-radiation missiles is really going to help you out all that much. So I'd probably just get a bunch of these, just get some of these with with AA missiles if you need that kind of capability. But these are not the only helicopters you're going to be able to use, because Special Forces do have stealth helicopters that's attached to their infantry, so the Silent Hawks over here, but we'll get into that in just a moment. Support-wise is really where you're going to suffer over here with this kind of deck, and where a Striker Regiment might be more useful, because you're going to be lacking air defenses, you're going to be lacking artillery in particular, and you're going to be lacking trucks. So you do want to have some trucks, of course, for the sake of, transporting supplies, moving things across, right? You do have some options in artillery, but over here, the principal thing I would worry about is just getting LAVADs for that kind of anti-air capability. Everything else is not too important. You can get some mortars, you can get some limited, and I do emphasize the limited aspect of it, limited artillery, but yeah, this is the one weakness of the deck. So if you want artillery, if you want Patriots, CRAMs, etc., you do want to go with the Strikers. That would be my view on that subject, but the Marines do have certain advantages over here, specifically the helicopter situation. Like, yeah, King Stallions are ridiculous. Now, air power wise, I would pick an AC-130J, and regardless of how you customize it, it's something that the enemy can't ignore, because if you leave an AC-130 on the battlefield, it's going to do a lot of freaking damage on your first forces, especially if it has Stormbreaker or Hellfire missiles or Griffin missiles. But it's still one of the cheapest planes you can bring in a battlefield. And the important thing here, it's not something the enemy can ignore. So players can't ignore an AC-130. You can ignore a cargo plane. You can't ignore an AC-130 because it's going to blow up a significant portion of your forces if you do. And it's very cheap in comparison to many, many, many other things. So that's the role of the AC-130. Whether or not you want one or two of them, that depends on what you want else in your deck. But I would bring F-22 Raptors and just fill them with AIM-60s. These two planes are going to dominate the air battle for you. There's very few things that can hold their own against an F-22 in general. So that is one aspect. And then you have the EA-6B Prowlers. Now, these are kind of your sacrificial planes, right? But the role they have is that they can hunt down enemy air defense. Now, you can go with either ECM or fuel pods or fuel tanks, all that. Depends on the kind of players you're dealing with. Most of the time, just going for full-on harm missiles. So having 4 harm missiles is probably really the way to go, as people have pointed out to me, and as I've come to realize myself. Because you just have that capability of hunting down air defenses. And by the way, this is where the AC-130 is really good, because you can figure out where those air defenses are relatively cheaply, and then send in A6B Prowlers, which are going to take them out. They're going to die. Bear that in mind. They're going to die in the process unless you go with ACM, but survivability is less of a concern. These are cheap planes with missiles to hunt them down, to hunt that down. Then we have the B2 Spirit, so we can only bring one. Now, if you want to use a tactical nuke, you got to understand you're going to sacrifice a lot for that kind of tactical nuclear capability. Instead, what I would recommend more so with the B2 Spirit is either you go for cruise missiles, because it has 16 cruise missiles, or you can use the combination of planes to have the capability of clearing the airspace and then just dropping a massive freaking payload of bombs on the enemy. 80 in total. That is going to clear a significant portion of the map for you, and not something that should be ignored in a match. And yeah, you can bring a lot of cruise missiles on something. That is a decision you can have right there. Or you can have more versatility with your planes in different ways. So you can get, for instance, Harriers. They're slow as hell actually, but they do have a pretty good air-to-ground capability in terms of the various munitions that they do have on them. Or you can go with an F-18 if that's your decision, but F-18D specifically, because you wouldn't necessarily need that. But that's your personal decision on what you think is worth it from that specific perspective. Like, what do you think is important to have? Like a designation pod on a Harrier, for instance, right? As an example, if you want that, or having a gun in an ECM pod so you can do some gun runs on an enemy with, say, Maverick missiles, right? So this is just an example, but there's plenty of choices. I would say the key aspects here are the F-22s, the B-2, and the EC-130. Everything else, maybe some EA-6B Prowlers if you want to, but that depends on what you're dealing with. So yes, I've gone overboard with all of these, but that's kind of the point over here. Recon capability. Having drones, so an RQ-170 and then let's say 2 Reaper drones is pretty useful. You can put Stinger missiles and AT missiles on Reapers. In fact, you can probably saturate the airspace with a lot of these. These are very, very cheap in comparison. Like 135 points for this kind of attack capability is pretty useful, though keep in mind drones do have a tendency of, dying very quickly. Then you have Green Berets. So with Green Berets, you do have a bunch of different options. So a rocket launcher, a grenade launcher, right here. It depends on what kind of capability you want. You can focus more on close quarters. You can focus more on long range, though you do have close quarters capability over here with some other things. So maybe going with the flash right there. And yeah, getting the silent hawk is one of the keys, because these transport helicopters are going to be pretty fantastic. I would get some Ranger snipers with anti-material rifles. They're not going to be great, far from it. You can even put them on foot to save yourself some points, because you're going to have plenty of capability. Or you can go with little birds, get some helicopters right there for them. You can also go with forced recon, so green ops versus black ops right there, if you want that kind of capability right there. So just 2 snipers, 4 green berets, 2 forced recon on foot. Just, an example right there. Or you can put them in an LAV if you want to. But then we get to the infantry, the true winners right here. And you have a bunch of choices, but yeah, Delta Force is really great in a lot of ways. So I'd probably prefer getting them to have standoff capability right there. Get 3 of them. They're going to do a pretty good job. And then you have AT missiles, so the Cat Sabers right there, with different kinds of options right there. So you can get either Bushmaster rocket launcher, or you can just go with the AFVP. Yeah, weird names, I know. But yeah, just get a bunch of AT missiles right there, just 4 of them, overfly attack. They're going to be great. You do have Marine Raiders, and Marine Raiders, best as I can tell, are amazing in terms of close quarters combat. Like, they're just freaking ridiculous. They have those shotguns. Like, you do want these guys, and you do want them probably for close quarter combat capability. But you do want units with Silent Hawks And the reason you want that, like both the units with Silent Hawks, you want that because they're going to be able to provide you that level of capability right there. So I'm just going to remove a couple of things right here. You know, maybe some of the trucks, try and save some of the points right here. You know, just free Rangers right there. Or for, Green Berets, rather. But yeah, Rangers are kind of your basic infantry, but you can go with different kinds of things, but I would get Silent Hawks. Like, just that kind of capability of moving infantry with stealth helicopters, like, that, like, enemies many times won't even detect these things. And that's one of the winners, I would say, in a situation like this. So yeah, we get directly 10,000 points. You're suffering in terms of vehicles, you're suffering in terms of support, but you do end up winning in a lot of ways in terms of freaking infantry, recon capability, and air power. And that's really the whole point of a deck like this. Though how you want to customize individual things, that's a different discussion, but you get the gist of it. Kwasine, signing out. Stay tuned for more.